I never saw the craft that disabled my missiles. I and my commander were located 60 feet underground. We were locked into a hardened capsule made of concrete and steel, and had a large door which we could not open until we were relieved by another crew. So even though I was getting reports real time of this object hovering above us, we could not go upstairs and take a look because it could have been a ploy, of course, for some kind of entry into our capsule, which would have been a big threat because we had those missiles, of course, ready to go, and bad actor could have launched them. So we had to stay locked in. I never saw the object, but it was described to me as a glowing red pulsating light with something inside the light that was hard to see because it was so bright. And it hovered just above us, above the front gate. All the guards were out there with their weapons drawn. I basically ordered to make sure the site was secure, use whatever means they had to do that. And no one was injured. There was no damage to the equipment. The missiles themselves received no permanent damage. They simply disabled the guidance system of the missiles, but they did it within seconds, and they did it by sending a signal through 60 feet of earth and concrete, penetrating a large cable, which was triply shielded against EMI, and intermittently cycling a piece of hardware that was part of the guidance system of the missile, thereby shutting it down.
1967 Maelstrom Air Force Base incident. Could you describe in detail what happened during that incident?
Well, briefly, and again, Fated Giant is the first book I wrote in 2005, along with James Klotz, the man that helped me investigate and get some data from the Air Force under the Freedom of Information Act. It has a lot of those documents that were received in the back of the book. So anybody interested in this subject, I would recommend my book, Fated Giant, and you can get it on Amazon. But we were on duty on March 24th, 1967, near a place called Roy, Montana, which was about 100 and some miles to the east of Maelstrom Air Force Base. It was one of about 15 sites that we had. I think you've got a map there you could show. We had 15 launch control centers. That's it. And circled around those large dots there are smaller dots which show the launch facilities. They were about a mile or two away from our command center, and that's where the missiles were actually located. They were called launch facilities. So on March 24th, I was on alert status. My commander was taking a break, and first thing, I got a call sometime in the evening. I don't remember exactly what time, but it was dark out. And the main guard upstairs, we called the flight security controller, stated that they've been watching some strange lights in the sky above our facility, flying very fast, no engine noise, stopping on a dime, reversing course, making 90-degree turns at high speed. And he kept stating over and over, "These are not airplanes, sir." I even joked with him and said, "You mean like they could be UFOs?" I was joking, but in fact, we had seen reports in the local newspaper, the Great Falls Tribune, of people reporting lights in the sky, different colored lights, and and so those stories had been in the paper all that previous week and before that. So I was joking with him, and he just said, he kept saying, "These are not aircraft, sir." And I had to take him seriously, of course. This was not a joke. Um, we never joked around like that with our communications. So I thanked him for the report. I said, keep an eye on these things. Let me know if anything interesting happens. And and I hung up the phone. And so now about 5 minutes or so go by. And this time he calls back and he's screaming into the phone. Uh, Very frightened. I can tell by his voice he's frightened. He's babbling. He doesn't make any sense. I calm him down, and finally he says, "Sir, there's a glowing red object, pulsating at times. No engine noise, nothing, but it's hovering just above the front gate, and I've got all the guards out here with their weapons pointed at it. What should we do?" And he was probably asking me if they should fire on it. Of course, I didn't know what the heck this thing was, and I just told him. I said, "Make sure you secure the facility." That's really what their job was, to secure the facility. Of course, they had the authority to fire on any intruders that would try to get in our gated area. And we had signs up, of course, stating that. Um, so then he said, "Well, one of the guards got injured. I've got to go." So he hung up the phone. Um, I immediately looked over at our status board to see how our missiles were doing. They were all green at that time, ready to go. I went over to wake up my commander, who was taking a rest break, and just as I was about to tell him about the phone calls, we started getting horns go off in the capsule, and we knew what that meant. There was issues with the missiles themselves. We looked over. Two of the missiles had turned fault and showed a red indicator, which meant no-go or fault in the missiles. And then right after that, the rest of them went down to, red, from green to red, no-go, all 10 within seconds. And so he jumped up, went to our checklist. He went and called the command post back at Maelstrom, and I had two indicators on two of the launch facilities that there was a possible incursion into those areas. We had motion detectors and things like that to detect possible incursions. So I had to call up and send guards out there. When I talked to the main guard, I said, "What's the status of this bright light?" And he said it just flew off just as I called. So it was up there when these things went down. And of course, we drew the conclusion that somehow this thing affected our missiles. We didn't know how at the time. These things were very reliable. I was there for 3 years on duty and never had any incident even close to losing more than one missile for any reason. And then my commander turned to me and said the same thing happened on another flight. At the time, I thought he meant that evening, but later on, when I researched this in depth, I found out that this was the Echo flight incident. We were at Oscar flight. but that incident happened 8 days earlier, very similar to ours. UFOs were seen over 2 of the launch facilities. The missiles were all shut down within seconds of that. And the guards that I sent out to look at those other 2 facilities saw these UFOs again hovering over those sites and probably tripped those indicator lights that I mentioned.
What was your reaction to wondering what this was at the time?
My reaction was we very certainly could have been under attack. The way the guards were responding, but I couldn't imagine what kind of an attack from some light. I know they were very frightened, but that's what I thought in the moment. But like I said, we were pretty secure where we were, and we weren't going to open that door for anything until we were relieved the next morning.
At what point did you start thinking that it might be something from either, I guess, extraterrestrials or crypto-terrestrials, or something possibly not from a known foreign entity?
Well, I'll tell you, we reported this. After we were relieved by another crew, we were ordered to go to our squadron commander's office, and the first thing I asked him, this was an old World War II bomber pilot. He was white as a sheet. I asked him, was this some sort of an Air Force exercise? Because that's the only thing I could think of to try to explain it. And he said, absolutely not. And then there was a guy from AFOSI in the room, and he basically ordered us to sign an NDA, never to speak about this again to anyone. I complained a little bit about that. We already had above top secret clearances, and we weren't about to, if we were told something was classified, we were certainly not going to talk about it. But he insisted, because this was about this specific incident. So we signed it at that point. And then we were not able to talk about it to the guards again or anyone else. Later, I began to be a little suspicious about what the heck was going on. Because again, this was not any kind of a attack where some other group of people tried to get in our facility. How do you explain this? And we were looking for answers. Each time we went on alert status, we'd have a debrief in a large room. They'd debrief all the crews going out that day on any issues involving the missiles, whether it was some glitch in any of the missile parts or some improvement program they had or anything at all, really. And we never heard anything about our incident, the shutdown of those missiles, or the previous incident, the Echo flight incident, which happened 8 days earlier. So I began to suspect there was some major cover-up going on at that point. Of course, I couldn't talk about it until about 1994. By then, I was out of the Air Force, and I was walking through a bookstore and saw a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good. I opened that to page 301, happened to, and right there was a short paragraph talking about UFOs shutting down missiles at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1966 and 67. And it sounded like my incident. Of course, this had been about, 27 years later after the event. And I had forgotten some of the details. Of course, hadn't talked to anybody about it. And some of the detail just kind of, I'd forgotten the exact location where I was, who my commander was, etc. But I thought, since it was in the book, maybe we could submit a FOIA request to the Air Force and get some information about this. So I did, along with a man from Mutual UFO Network, James Klotz, one of their investigators in the Washington area. This was in Seattle. And we submitted a FOIA request. We didn't say anything about UFOs. We simply referenced this paragraph in this book and asked if they would send us information about that particular shutdown of missiles on that particular date. And so the Air Force wrote back, said, this is classified. However, since it's been so long, we're going to declassify it and we'll send you some documents. And so they did.